My name is Joseph Matera. I'm the presiding bishop of Christ Covenant Coalition, and I represent City Action Coalition as the director. And City Action Coalition is a very large, multi-ethnic and multi-denominational association that represents tens of thousands of churches within New York State. The leaders of it is the Empire Missionary Baptist Convention. They have 85% of the Black Baptist churches in the state. Conlico is 12 Hispanic denominations. Christ Covenant Coalition represents several hundred churches in the greater New York area. And the CNE, Haitian Pastors Association, as well as many other associations that you will see that represent a large percentage of the 1.5 million evangelicals in New York City. Today we want to state our opposition to same-sex marriage for several reasons. First, legalizing same-sex marriage normalizes a union that excludes either a mother or a father, something that flies in the face of common sense and human experience, as well as a great deal of social science data on the benefits to children of being raised by mothers and fathers. Marriage is the union of male and female for a reason. Second, same-sex marriage poses a deep and serious threat to religious liberty. There is a direct legal threat to religious organizations and individuals who cannot, in good conscience, treat a union of two men or two women as a marriage. But even if ironclad exemption language could be hurriedly crafted in the next 24 hours or the last few hours of a legislative session, without time for careful review, same-sex marriage would generate new ethical norms for society that would exclude and marginalize as bigots any Bible believers and others who see marriage as the union of husband and wife. In addition, protecting religious groups does not shield the millions of individuals and families who will be forced to affirm same-sex marriage in their schools, businesses, and family residences, even if it violates their religious convictions and conscience. Nor will parents have any right to prevent their children from being taught in public schools that gay marriage is a civil rights victory. Third, gay marriage is not a civil right. Even the highest court in New York has already ruled and recognized this. Many New Yorkers in our coalition object to people like Mayor Bloomberg surrounding this latest fashionable cause with the hollowed language born of African Americans' hard struggle for freedom. All New Yorkers have the right to live as they choose, but none of us has the right to redefine marriage. Finally, we want to send a message to the senators, especially the Republican senators, who told voters they oppose same-sex marriage, and now they are planning on voting for it. We will remember you on Election Day. We will work hard to vote you out of office with the thousands of churches that we represent. New York voters will not favor senators who have betrayed or ignored their constituents, especially not in order to curry political favor with Governor Cuomo and special interest groups. We will replace you with leaders who affirm the moral values that made our nation great and are the backbone of all human society. Today, we have standing with us New York football giant David Tyree, who is not only a Super Bowl hero, but also now a hero for family and marriage and all Americans. When I called him up and told him that other New York sports stars are openly supporting same-sex marriage and asked him to stand with us in our rally last Tuesday on the steps of New York City. By the way, we had 150 key pastors standing with us on the steps. And I asked him to come. He was willing to come, and he said this: he cared more about marriage and family than his reputation. He's the first celebrity that I know of and the first New York athlete to come out opposed to same-sex marriage. And we know there are many, but he's the first one to actually say it. And we hope he opens the floodgates and he becomes one of many. And since then, he made a video for the National Organization for Marriage, and his comments have gone viral and have made the headlines of many leading media outlets in the nation. And so I want to introduce to you New York football giant, great Super Bowl hero, David Tyree.
I'm honored to stand with the members of the clergy in New York and all these concerned citizens and with all of you here today. Those of you who know me, I'm not a political person. I'm speaking for marriage because this is not another political issue. Marriage is near and dear to my heart and to God's heart for a specific reason. I want to tell the New York senators, this is not about right and left, it's about right and wrong. Marriage is an honorable estate not created by government, but founded in nature and in God's nature. Some things really are written on the human heart. Children long for the love and care of their mother and father in the same home, and marriage is the unique relationship that makes this all possible. I know that not everyone agrees with what I have to say, but I'm honored to stand here for marriage. I'm here as a father and a husband who knows in his bones my children need both me and their mother. I'm here because as a citizen, we are all called to stand up for what's right. I always knew that God had a hand enabling me to make that catch with one hand on the side of my head. That was something I couldn't do with my own abilities. Perhaps God orchestrated that play to give me a platform for what I'm doing here today. To urge political leaders all over our nation to reject same-sex marriage and to stand up for traditional marriage, which is truly the backbone of our civilization. I'm here today not for myself, but for my children, my children's children, and for the well-being and the quality of life of all Americans. Trust the people of New York, not politicians in Albany, with the future of marriage. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all. May God give marriage the victory today. Amen.
Next we have Maggie Gallagher.
Thank you. My name is Maggie Gallagher. I'm chairman of the National Organization for Marriage, and I should say I lived 20 years in New York. My children were raised here, and this is a very important day for me and for all New Yorkers. I just want to pick up on something that David Tyree, who's a great man, said, which is that government did not create marriage. We are not dealing with a licensing scheme just like any other. Marriage is a core social institution, not only in this state and in this country, but in virtually every known human society. Every human beings across time and cultures have recognized that there is something special about a union of a husband and wife that is the only kind of union capable of creating new life and connecting those children in love to their mother and father. And in the last waning days of this session, there is no the push to try to come up with some hasty language to avoid unintended consequences of the kind that Bishop Matera is going to be doomed to failure. There's no time for review, and there's no pressing urgency about doing something that could in fact injure the rights of millions of other New Yorkers. Whether or not the senators believe this or want this, if the Republican-controlled Senate passes gay marriage, this is going to be seen as something that Republicans did. It is going to split it. You see behind me a coalition of people of every race and creed and color in both political parties. But I will say that the base of the Republican Party is going to be split for years to come if it is in fact Republicans who pass the gay marriage bill. And I hope and I pray that they instead do trust the people of New York. Let's have a referendum. Let's let the people decide the future of marriage in a fair and free vote. And I would call on gay marriage advocates to join us in referring it and trusting the people of New York with this decision. Thank you.
At this time, we have Bishop Harry Jackson, who's going to speak about how this should not be equated with civil rights. He's the international presiding bishop of the International Coalition of Evangelical Churches. It was just launched recently and already has over 1,000 churches nationwide. Bishop.
Greetings, everyone. Same-sex marriage is not a civil right. Many African Americans have chafed at that notion because we understand the individual rights that our Constitution protects does not extend to this area of marriage. Marriage is designed to promote the good of the culture and the society. And from a national perspective, New York needs to see itself as a guardian for traditional marriage. Right. Everywhere where there's been a vote on marriage, you found that African Americans especially have rejected the civil rights argument because they know what this kind of activity will do long term, that it will fracture, redefine, and demean an institution that needs to be the bedrock of all society. Thank you.
We have Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage.
I'll be simple and direct. As my co-belligerent in the fight to protect marriage, Bishop Harry Jackson, has said, there is no right to redefine marriage. But don't misunderstand. Those of us gathered here today, black, white, Hispanic, Jewish, Catholic, Protestant, people of no particular faith, we are here to stand up for a core civil right. We're here to stand up for the civil right of children to have both a mother and a father. We're here to stand up for the civil rights of religious organizations and individuals to not be punished, to not be marginalized, to not be equated in the law as bigots. But most importantly, we are here for the most fundamental and basic civil right, the right of the people to vote. 64 senators should not be making the decision on the 62 senators should not be making the decision on the future of marriage. Instead, the entire electorate of New York should. This should go to an advisory referendum, and I have no doubt that the people of New York will do the same thing that has been done in California and Maine and 31 states. Whenever the people have had the chance to stand up for marriage, they have stood up to protect it as the union of one man and one woman. Thank you.
Let the people vote.
Let the people vote. Let the people vote. Let the people vote.
We have Jason McGuire of the New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedom.
My name is Jason McGuire, of course. I'm Executive Director of New Yorkers for Constitutional Freedoms. And we also were calling on the New York State Senate and the New York State Assembly to recognize the right of the people to have a vote on an issue of this magnitude. This is not something that should be decided by a handful of legislators, but it should be decided by the people of New York. This is an issue of great magnitude, and there's no reason for us to move as hastily as we have been. 63 is the magic number. Not senators, but 63,000 petitions that have been signed by New Yorkers all across this great state. There's a stack of them here. I know quarters are tight, but a good shot. 63,000 petitions. That's an important number. That's an important number because more than 63 million Americans in 31 state elections have already voted on constitutional marriage amendments. A vote has gone to the people. And in those places, 40 million Americans, or 63% of the overall, have said that marriage should be defined between one man and one woman. The governor has been prone to say that 60%, and let me add that he rounds his numbers up rather liberally, but he says that 60% favors same-sex marriage. If that be true, there should be no worry about putting this to the people of New York State and letting them have a vote. We believe that the people should have a voice and the people should have a choice. It's time to put it to a vote. Let the people of New York State decide what will be the definition of marriage within New York State. Thank you very much.
Let the people vote.
Let the people vote.
Now, if there's any questions for any of us, we're here for that.
Yeah, I have a question about the definition of marriage. In the assembly, the proponents were saying that the marriage evolved over several centuries, and at one time, marriage, women were owned by the husband, and that was considered marriage. Which part of, which definition of marriage are you, referring to? Why not evolve into this next phase? Marriage has evolved over the years.
What we're pointing to is the reality that in virtually every known human society, there is an institution called marriage. It's about bringing together males and females so that children have a known mother and a known father. And that although marriage is, the marriage in all of these cultures doesn't look like our own, which actually, frankly, has deep roots in Jewish and Christian culture. A lot of weird stuff human beings have come up with. Every society has recognized that the whole society has an interest in bringing together male and female so that children have a father as well as a mother.
But that didn't
and
answer
this,
the question.
well, yes, it does.
Marriage evolving into the next phase.
Well, what we think is that we are still in a society that needs to recognize that marriage is unique. It's just different, okay? And there is no individual civil right to decide that your relationship ought to be considered a marriage. And I think that what the evolution you're describing would be harmful to our society. If same-sex marriage involves a rejection of the idea that marriage is about bringing together male and female, the two great halves of humanity, so children have a mother and father. If the government of New York says two men are a marriage, then marriage is clearly no longer based on that principle anymore. Can we change the meaning of all words? I mean, actually, I will stand with Abraham Lincoln on this question, right? He was once asked, if we call the tail of a dog a leg, how many legs does a dog have? And he said the answer is 4, because a tail is not a leg. But in any case, we'd say whether you agree or disagree, those who claim that the majority of New Yorkers support this new evolution in marriage ought to, like us, be willing to trust the people of New York. One thing we do know is that politicians in Albany did not create the institution called marriage, and they have no business redefining it without the vote of the people.
Are there any other questions? Any other questions?
What's happened in states that have already legalized it? What's happened to marriage there?
Well, we're seeing well, first of all, we're in the beginning stages, but we've seen, actually looked at polling data in Massachusetts that shows a fairly sharp drop in just a few years in the number of people who believe that the ideal for a child is a married mother and father. We're seeing across the country the religious liberty impacts, which it's not just pastors who are talking about it. My understanding is that there was a letter from a Stanford law professor who's an expert on religious liberty, a Harvard Law School professor, Marianne Glendon, and one of the editors of a book called Same-Sex Marriage and Religious Liberty, that leading legal scholars are acknowledging that the foundational idea that equality requires gay marriage, the recognition, is going to impact people who disagree in good conscience, and that to equate support for marriage as the union of husband and wife with bigotry or hatred is to say we plan to use this law to marginalize and stigmatize people who disagree with us, and who either, if they ground it in human nature or in the great principles laid out in Genesis, we are seeing that come true in practical ways, both for individuals and for religious organizations. Well, the interesting thing that I was really interested in, the CDC released data on the well-being of gay teens, and I was really interested to see that in Massachusetts, which has had gay marriage since 2004, teens are, I think, around two times more likely to contemplate suicide than teens in Wisconsin, that has a marriage amendment passed in 2006 defining marriage as one man and one woman. So I don't think that gay marriage is going to benefit very many people. We see very low rates of entry by same-sex couples, very high rates of dissolution. I think it's going to be on that side largely a symbolic issue, and I understand symbols matter. They matter to us as well. And meanwhile, we will have government stepping forward to say that our traditional natural understanding of the family is now bigotry, and I think that's a problem.
Are you harmed in any other way other than, you know, the clergy not, if they don't want to perform a marriage, then they don't have to and they'll be held harmless? I mean, it's just people to go to the city hall or town hall and get a certificate and go that route. It's a civil same-sex marriage.
What it is our government changing the meaning of marriage for everyone in the state of New York to the extent that the government has power, which it does. You ask how I'm going to be harmed. I don't view this as about me. I mean, I think people who are doing this, who are getting involved in this fight, well, I think it's for the good of the whole country. I actually don't even think it's going to be good for gay people in this country to have gay marriage, if I'm right. Everyone, whether they marry or not, needs a social institution that is backed and recognized by government that's really about transmitting the whole society into the next generation. And what gay marriage does is it cuts that link, and it says marriage is about adults, our rights, you know, our desires, and that these are justify redefining a core social human institution known throughout time and place. And we can see that it's going to be very hard to stand up for the idea that children needs a mother and father if our government is teaching our children in public schools that that idea is discredited bigotry.
It is about the next generation. If kids are taught that same-sex marriage is a right in elementary school, it will redefine the basic building block of the culture. That's the generational impact of this decision. That's what we're concerned about, not what people do in private, but what happens to the culture because of the public proclamation and the acceptance of this kind of marriage.
Also, as a New Yorker, you know, we are all harmed by this process, by the way that this is coming about. I mean, this is going to take, for this law to pass, it's going to involve 1,300 other laws that have to be passed in order for this law to be considered civil. And right now, we are facing probably one of the most important decisions in the history of the state of New York is the rent control law. That's threatening to put thousands of New Yorkers out on the street if that law is not passed. And yet, the governor has pushed us here, has brought us to this point. The mayor has come to lobby at this point. We are all harmed because this is not a priority agenda for the majority of New Yorkers. Rent control is. We're not speaking about that. We're not talking about that. This should go before, as a referendum, before the people of the state of New York. Let the people decide and not legislators.
Also, if we legalize same-sex marriage, we're going to make normative a union in which a child could be raised without a mother or a father. It also has economic ramifications because the prisons have about 85% of the people in prison don't have a father at home. And so we will be further legalizing a dysfunctional condition that's only getting worse. The other thing is marriage has been proven to be the major mediating institution in which we're able to aid and benefit all of society. That's why there's been many benefits for married couples. And if we redefine marriage, what is going to happen is government is going to have to get larger. That means more taxation. We're already collapsing under the weight of our own, under our own weight with all the taxation. And so we're just going to make many, many problems worse if we legalize same-sex marriage.
Excuse me, I have a question. I heard that in Massachusetts there were many Roman Catholic orphanages that had to close because of lawsuits against them. Can you verify that? Have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, well, it's a fact that the Boston Catholic Charities had to drop, it's the nation's oldest, I believe, adoption and foster care agency because of the threat of litigation. We're just now seeing that repeated. A few months back, when Illinois passed a badly drafted civil union statute, the sponsor promised that religious liberty would be protected. But as soon as it was passed, all of a sudden, same-sex couples decided to go to Catholic and evangelical Lutheran charities and allege discrimination because those agencies don't place children with same-sex couples. It's not about gay adoption. There's plenty of other agencies that do. It's about whether one adoption agency cannot be allowed to help poor children if it doesn't agree with the government's definition of marriage. And in Illinois, that answer looks like it's still an open legal question, but the answer is really up in the air because what happens is people say, well, we wouldn't do that for you if you were a bigot who was opposed to interracial marriage. That's what they told the Catholic Charities. And so that race analogy, which is used over and over again, you cannot say that and then say that gay marriage will not have consequences. It will. Once that principle is in the law, the principle is going to be pushed, and it's going to affect the rights of other people.
Do you live in New York State?
I moved out 2 years ago, but I raised my children. I'm in the D.C. area now. We have a national office. But I own a home in Ossining, and I raised my 2 children in New York.
Because in Rensselaer County, the county Department of Social Services put a Jewish child in with a same-sex couple. So it's already being done.
No, gay adoption is everywhere. You missed the point. It's not about whether gay people adopt. It's about whether Catholics can run an adoption agency according to their own conscience and principle, and other Christians and Orthodox Jews and people of faith. So it's not that by the Catholic Charities is trying to prevent gay adoption. They're just trying to help as many poor children find good homes without surrendering their conscience and their religious views. And that's what's at risk. It's the religious liberty of dissenters to the government's new vision of what a marriage is that's at stake.
That's made on the other side to the point is that if you would put mixed race marriage on a referendum in Mississippi in the 40s or 50s or even into the 60s, it would have been voted down quickly.
I would say that through a very arduous process, America has come to a consensus. Today, there's no question, today we see racism as something that's un-American. There is a process we must follow to come to some kind of agreement around this issue. Right now, we're being set up to have winners and losers, with perhaps the next generation being the most challenged. So we shouldn't force this right now.
Isn't that the kind of incrementalist argument you made all through the 40s and 50s about blacks in the military?
I don't think so. Charles Hamilton Houston The great dean of Howard Law School and Thurgood Marshall fought in the courts, one battle after another battle, and while they were fighting the courts, public opinion changed, and the public at the same time came to a crescendo with the legal system, and change was permanent. Unless we get a process, we're going to have tremendous problems.
I would say the New York court has already rejected that analogy for the state of New York. It has ruled there is no right to gay marriage. If the legislatures do this because they have a personal and private vision that this is a civil right, I don't think that's shared by a majority of New Yorkers. I think they would trust the people and not the politicians to decide the future of marriage. And I would also just say, I understand there are people who disagree, but for people of every race and creed and color who are standing up for marriage, this is just totally apples and oranges. You know, to call the comparison between marriage as the union of a man and a woman, a husband and wife who can give their child a mother and father, that's not based in irrationality or hatred or prejudice. It has deep roots in human nature. These two kinds of unions really are not the same. And whatever we want to do to express respect and to meet the legitimate social needs of gay people in our society, it's just wrong to redefine marriage. None of us have the right to do that in our view.
Legalizing same-sex marriage is changing the core fundamental value that has stabilized our society to accommodate 0.3% of the population. What about the other 99.7% of the population? Think about them.
There's another point over here. You're talking about evolution, as if everything has to have evolution, and evolution always makes it better. What about open marriages of 5 or 6 people? Using your same logic, we've got to come to a communal attitude of understanding. It's better if 7 people could stay in one bed. And it's great for the children. We just have to evolve to it. Why does everything have to evolve to something better? Some of the things here, like the way people dress, the music, the crassness of the culture, is devolving. Maybe this is part of the devolving. Maybe same-gender marriage is going south.
Yes.
Wow.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Very good.